Welcome guys sa ating panibagong Sir Ed's Math Tutorial. Sa video na to, pag-usapan natin yung about lang sa proof of basic derivative ng trigonometric functions. So ito guys, ay mga basic trigo functions and ito po yung mga derivative nila, no? But later on, we will be proving 4 of this theorem or this derivative, namely tangent x, cosecant x, secant x, and cotangent x. Si sin x and cosine x, automatic guys, this will be their equivalent. So, I guess this is very self-explanatory. So, no need for the proof of this one. Ito lang guys, tangent, the cosecant, secant, cotangent, or let's say cosecant or secant. Then also, we will be having other identities. Okay, so those identities guys ay ito po sila. Itong mga identities na to ay pwede natin gamitin sa pag-prove ng mga trigonometric functions or identities. Si tangent can also be written as sin x over cosine x. So this is equivalent also to tangent x. Okay? Also, si secant x is equal to 1 over cosine x. So, isa lang ito sa mga ilan lang ito sa mga pwede natin gamitin sa pag-proof, no, ng mga trigonometric identities. Meron din tayong identities na sin squared x plus cosine squared x. Ang equivalent nito guys, based sa Pythagorean principle of trigonometry, this is equal always to 1. So if we encounter like this function, automatic guys, ang equal niya ay 1. Also, meron din tayong sa cotangent guys. Ang cotangent can also be written as we have cosine x over sin x. Ito po ay reverse lamang siya or inverse lamang siya ng tangent. So if our tangent is sine over cosine, automatic si cotangent guys will be cosine over sin x. Si secant naman will be equal to 1 over cosine x, no? Okay. Okay, so first proof natin guys, we are going to prove that the derivative of tangent x is equal to secant squared x. So, alamin natin kung saan galing si secant squared x na based dito sa proof natin. Okay, sabi ko kanina guys, ang tangent x, for us to prove that, kailangan natin siyang kunin doon sa mga trigonometric identities na nai-present natin kanina, no? Para mas madali natin siyang masolve. And we are going to use the either product rule or the quotient rule of the differentiation. So, may certain formula tayo guys na gagamitin natin kung either division or multiplication ang isang operation. In case of tangent, si tangent x can be written as, ano kanina, we have sin x over cosine x. So, pwede natin itong gamitin guys para ma-prove natin na siya ay equal sa secant squared x. Okay, so since division ito guys, we are going to use the quotient rule of differentiation. Wherein the formula is equal to, let us assume guys that this is the f of x, yung nasa taas, and this is the g of x. Okay, so ang magiging formula natin guys, since this is quotient rule, we have the g of x is equal to, g of x times the derivative of the f of x minus, tanggalin na natin ito saglit. Okay. So, since quotient tayo ha, g of x times the derivative of f of x, then minus, we have f of x times the derivative of g of x. And that is all over to g of x, then square. So, let us assume lang guys na this is f of x and this is g of x. Okay, now, so solve lang natin siya. Ang g of x natin will be the cosine x. Lagay lang natin siya. We have cosine x times the derivative of the f of x. Ang derivative ng sin x guys is cosine x. So kanina, pwede natin gamitin si dx of sine x that is equal to cosine x. At ang derivative naman ng cosine x will be negative sine x. Okay? So since ang derivative ng sine x is cosine, we can multiply it by another cosine x. So we have minus, ang f of x natin is sine x. We have here sine x, then the derivative of g of x. So ang cosine here will be the negative sine x. So just multiply lang natin. We have negative sine x. And that is all over 2. G of x will be cosine. Then, we have cosine x tapos square. Okay? So, ito na po ang another form natin. And we are going to solve that here. So, ang gawin na natin, cosine x times cosine x will be cosine squared x. Then, negative times negative here guys, kaya magiging positive na siya. And sine times sine, or sine x times sine x will be sine squared x. And that is all over 2. We have now cosine x squared will be cosine squared x. So this is another form guys. Now, looking at the numerator, the cosine squared x plus sine x, or sine squared x, this is another identity guys by means of Pythagorean theorem. Ang equivalent ito guys na nasa taas ng numerator is equal to 1. So, we can write now or rewrite this equation into the form of this will be only equal to, since this is equal to 1, you can rewrite this as 1 over cosine squared x. Now, since this is dalawang cosine x, pwede natin siyang i-factor out. Magiging siya ay 1 over cosine x, then multiply by another 1 over cosine x. Now, since dalawa po ang 1 over cosine x natin, using doon sa other identities, ang 1 over cosine x is equal to secant. Okay? So, 1 over cosine is secant. That is the inverse of the function. So, ibig sabihin, dalawang secant x. So, we can assume that, or we can conclude that we have secant x times secant x. So, pag multiply na natin yan guys, that will be equal to secant squared x. So, proven guys, or this will be our answer, and that means this is correct. Okay, second one, we have to prove, or we are going to prove that the derivative of cotangent x is equal to negative cosecant or cosecant squared x. Okay, so again, kanina ginamit natin si tangent x, which is equal to sine over cosine. So since this is the inverse of tangent, we can also rewrite cotangent x as, so the reverse only of the sine over cosine, which is cosine x over sine x. So this is another quotient rule guys, since division po siya now. So gamitin na ulit natin yung formula kanina, which is the g of x, then the derivative of f of x, minus, we have now f of x, and the derivative is multiplication, the derivative of, we have g of x. And that is all over 2 g of x, then square. Okay, so this one, let's assume that the cosine x is the f of x, and then the sine x now is the g of x. So gx is sine x, so we can have this one, sine x. Then the derivative of f of x, which is cosine x. So since cosine ito, the derivative of cosine is negative sine x. So we can multiply this negative sine x. Then minus, f of x now is cosine x. Then multiply natin siya sa derivative of g of x, which is sine x. And the derivative of sine x is cosine x. Okay, so that is all over 2 sine x, then square. Okay, so this one, since negative and positive ito, if we multiply that, we can have negative sine squared x. Then negative cosine x times cosine x is also negative cosine squared x. And that is all over 2. we have sine squared x. Now, here guys, pwede tayo mag-factor out dito. So, ilabas lang natin yung negative na yan. Para same lang naman sila, negative 1, negative 1. So, pag factor out natin siya, this becomes negative sine squared x plus cosine squared x. And that is all over 2 sine squared x. Okay, so looking at the numerator guys, sine squared x plus cosine squared x is also equal to 1. So, by Pythagorean theorem ito guys na trigonometric identities. No? So, this is equal to 1. So, we can have the negative. So, kaya negative 1 and all over 2 sine squared x. So, let's factor this one. Magiging negative 1 all over sine x times 1 over sine x. Okay, so ang 1 over sine x, so ilagay na natin dito yung negative, no? Okay, so ang 1 over sine x, guys, di ba? Based doon sa trigonometric identities na pinakita natin, 1 over sine x is equal to okay, saan natin ilagay? 1 over sine x, ang equivalent niya is cosecant or cosecant x. Reverse or inverse lang po sila. Okay? So, we can rewrite this 1 over sine x by cosecant or cosecant x. So, copy negative. So, we have negative here and we have cosecant or cosecant x times cosecant x. So, dalawa po sila. Kaya magiging negative, positive. We have negative cosecant squared then x. So, that means, guys, this is already proven. So, this is correct, no? Okay. The third one, guys, na i-prove natin is the derivative of cosecant or cosecant x, which is negative cosecant x cotangent x. So, ang derivative doon nito is negative cosecant x cotangent x. So, let's prove that. Okay. So, let's use the cosecant x, the expression, which is also equal to 1 over sine x. Okay. So, hahanapin na lang natin yung derivative nito. So, same lang naman ang expression nila. Cosecant is also 1 over sine x. So, again, we are going to use the quotient rule of differentiation. Okay, so this one, let's direct na, no? We have sine x as g of x. Then, the derivative of 1. We have now the derivative of 1. Okay, then minus, let's copy 1. Then the derivative of sine x. We have here sine x. And that is all over 2 sine x. We have squared. Okay, let's write this as sine x. Now, okay, so let's divide or derive this one. The derivative of 1 is, since derivative of constant ito guys, so meaning 0 ito. So, sine x times 0 minus 1, the derivative of sine x is cosine. So, we have cosine x. Then, that is all over 2 sine x or sine squared x. Now, sine x times 0, automatic guys, 0 na siya. So, this becomes negative 1, then cosine x. Or, let's say, negative cosine x. Pwede rin. So, pwede kayo maglagay ng negative 1 or pwede rin hindi na po. So, negative 1 cosine x, then all over sine squared x. Now, we can also factor this one. Ang factor nitong dalawa ha, or this numerator and denominator, we can rewrite this form as negative, then 1 over sine x, then multiply by cosine x, 1 over sine x. So, since sine x times sine x is sine squared x. Now, looking at the equation or the expression, 1 over sine x is also equal to negative, or sorry, cosecant x. So, we can rewrite this equation into cosecant. So, since may negative tayo, this is only equal to negative cosecant x, then cosine over sine x, or cosecant, or cosine x over sine x is equal to cotangent x. So, this one is correct. So, this means this is proven. Okay, for the last one, we have the derivative of secant x, which is equal to or equivalent to secant x and tangent x, or secant x times tangent x. So, let's prove that. Since ang secant x, guys, this is the inverse of the cosine. So, pwede nating i-rewrite ang secant x as the derivative of 1 over cosine x. So, pwede rin po itong dalawa. Okay? So, pwedeng secant or pwedeng 1 cosine. 1 over cosine. So, para mas madali guys, using this expression, we can prove that this is secant x then tangent x. So, since we are using the quotient rule, so g of x pa rin tayo, we have cosine x times the derivative of 1, then minus, we have 1 times the derivative of, we have here the derivative of cosine x. Okay, so that is 1 over 2 cosine x. So here, cosine x, lagyan natin, then derivative of 1 is 0. Then minus 1, the derivative of cosine is negative sine x. Okay? Then all over, we have cosine, oops, I forgot the exponent. We have cosine x, then square. Or just simply, we have, right natin, magiging cosine squared x. Okay? So let us eliminate this one since that is equal to 0. Then negative and negative will be positive. So this becomes 1 sine x, or just write sine x. So sine x all over cosine squared x. So by factoring guys, this becomes 1 over cosine x multiplied to sine x over cosine x. Because 1 times sine x is sine x, then cosine x times cosine x is cosine squared x. So simplify na lang natin. Ang 1 over cosine x is equivalent to secant. So we have now secant x. Then ang equivalent ito guys, sine over cosine is now your tangent. So this is equal to secant x and tangent x. Okay, so that is the proof. Okay guys, that's it, no? So these are the proof of the derivative of the trigonometric functions or identities. Okay, so I hope may naintindihan po sa proof. Okay, the next video that I'm going to present is the examples or problems involving the trigonometric functions or the derivative of trigonometric functions. Okay? So, hanggang dito na lang guys ang video natin. See you again sa next video natin. This is Sir Ed. Ciao.